Hello, I'm Alex Marquardt in this afternoon for Breonna Keeler, live from CNN's Washington headquarters. Up first, President Trump sounding off on a whole range of topics, including his stunning comment about accepting political dirt from a foreign source. Today, he tried to clarify his earlier comments that he would listen to the information about a political rival and that he might not notify the FBI. This is what he said today during an interview with Fox News.
I think it was accurately stated, and I've had a lot of support.
Well, then clarify it.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of support. First of all, I don't think anybody would present me with anything bad because they know how much I love this country. Number two, if I was, and of course you have to look at it, because if you don't look at it, you're not going to know if it's bad. How are you going to know if it's bad? But of course you give it to the FBI or report it to the Attorney General or somebody like that.
Of course you give it to the FBI. So for more, let's go right to our White House correspondent, Abby Phillip. Abby, today is actually the president's 73rd birthday, and as we saw there, he decided to kick it off by phoning up his favorite TV network. And in that interview, in that clip that we just heard, he tried to walk back, tried to clarify his earlier comments. How do you think he did?
Well, Alex, it seemed that he was trying to have it both ways there. He both walked it back and then also doubled down on it, claiming that he has gotten so much support for his comments in that ABC interview, when in fact it seems that the opposite has been true, that the condemnation has come fast and swift from both Democrats and from Republicans who say that the right answer is no, you do not accept information from a foreign government. But the president seemed to be saying something a little bit different today, where he's saying you just listen to it first, and then if it's bad, then you take it to the FBI or to the Attorney General. That's a little bit different from what he had to say to George Stephanopoulos in that interview with ABC, when he made it clear that he thought going to the FBI was not something that normal people did. He claimed that he probably had never in his entire life gone to the FBI with information, and that's not how the real world works, is basically how he described it. So the president is trying to do both things at the same time. It seems to be an acknowledgement that there has been some political blowback to his original comments. He wants to make it clear in this interview that he is a patriot, that nobody would even come to him with this kind of information because they understand that he loves this country. Those were his own words. But clearly, I think this attempt at a cleanup didn't quite do the trick, because I think in some ways the president created more problems for himself by making it clear that he would actually sit down, listen to the information, and then determine whether it was bad enough to warrant calling the FBI. Alex.
All right, further muddying the waters. Abby Phillip on North Lawn of the White House. Thank you. Now, President Trump also took the opportunity to blast House Speaker Nancy Pelosi for remarks that she made about his moral compass. The speaker saying that the president doesn't know right from wrong and took part in a, quote, criminal cover-up, citing examples in the Mueller report. CNN senior congressional correspondent Manu Raju is here. Manu, more salvos in this deepening and ongoing feud, and this time the president really not holding back in his response.
No, he's not. He's going after her. We saw this intensify last week when he was sitting at the American Cemetery in Normandy, and he had some remarks calling her a horrible.
All right, I'm sorry, we're going to have to cut you off, Manu. We cannot hear you. There are some technical difficulties, and we will try to get back to him in a little bit. But let's dig deeper on more of what the president said today with our panel. Phil Mudd, a CIA counterterrorism official, former official, Julie Hirschfield Davis, congressional correspondent for the New York Times, and Joe Moreno, a former Department of Justice prosecutor. Phil, first to you. The president, as we just heard from Abby there, trying to walk back what he said this week, that he had no problem taking dirt on opponents from a foreign source. And in this interview with Fox today, he said, of course, you have to report it to the FBI. So same question to you. How do you think he's cleaning this up?
Not that well. This is not very complicated. It's not about opposition research. I used to be in the spy business. If you go into a campaign in 2020 and you have, we saw this in Helsinki, a foreign government that favors a candidate. In Helsinki, Putin says, I favor the president. And you have a foreign government, let's say Russia or China, who favors a candidate. They might have an interest based on what the president said in the past couple of days to steal your financial data. Maybe your credit cards aren't paid. Right. To steal your emails. Maybe there's embarrassing information in there about an inappropriate relationship you have. That's what we call espionage. It's not on the candidates to vet that information. They need to place a phone call. There's no question. That's espionage.
And Joe, the president is saying that before he places that phone call that Phil was just talking about, that he'd have to look at that information to determine whether it's bad or not. Is that the way the law works?
No, obviously not. That's absolute nonsense. I think President Trump likes to exude this idea that he is the man, right? That he gets to decide what laws he does and does not adhere to. And so for him to say, I'm going to filter information, then I'll decide if I notify the Attorney General or the FBI, it's absolutely absurd.
That's not up to him.
It is not.
All right. Well, the president has also repeatedly tried to insinuate that the rules are different for him because he's the president. Let's take a listen.
One thing that's different with the president, I had dinner with the Queen. I met with the Prime Minister of the UK. I was with the head of France. I was with the head of all these nations, and I constantly am talking to them. And, you know, that puts us in a we have many, many conversations. And I'm just thinking, gee, if they say, we don't like your opponent, am I supposed to put, the president of France, am I supposed to report him to the FBI?
Phil, imagine that, Queen Elizabeth II at that state dinner slipping opposition research dirt across the table there. But more realistically, one of the examples that he gave was Francois Macron of France. Can you imagine any governments that we are close to engaging in this kind of behavior?
I can't. I mean, I used to meet foreign government officials every day. The president doesn't have to do this. I used to have to fill out a form, which half the time I didn't do. Fine, I violated a rule. But there's a fundamental difference, obviously, and let's make sure. I mean, this is funny, but not. Let's make sure we understand it. You have dinner with a foreign official to say, what should our policy be in Iran? That's what the president is talking about. Dinner with the Queen, for example, or lunch with the Queen. You have a meeting with a foreign official, in Don Jr.'s case, a Russian lawyer who's offering dirt, presumably stolen information about American candidate. This is apples and oranges, and the president's trying to suggest to us that an apple is like an orange. It's not. They're different.
Julie, the president also turning his sights, as he so often does, on the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. He called her comments fascist and disgraceful, which seems farther than he really has gone in the past. Pelosi, of course, saying that Trump doesn't know the difference between right and wrong. So who's goading who here, and who's coming out on top?
Well, I think they're both goading each other, but I would say that it seems like Nancy Pelosi really has gotten under President Trump's skin, and we've seen this happen time and again. She made a comment last night during an interview that he does a lot of projecting. So it's interesting he used the word fascist. She said, when he says Nancy's nervous, that means he's nervous. When he says Nancy's a mess, that means he's a mess. That's her way of trying to sort of throw it back on him. But I think what you're seeing here is a president who feels very threatened by the speaker, and a speaker who's trying to sort of hold off a group of Democrats in the Democratic caucus on Capitol Hill who are really calling for much more aggressive action against President Trump, potentially opening an impeachment inquiry. But one of the ways she's doing that is by trying to show solidarity by making these increasingly critical comments about him, that he, she made a private comment that he belongs in prison last week. She made these other comments about him not knowing right from wrong. It's pretty clear she and the president are going to continue to be engaging in this kind of war of words against each other.
And someone who is certainly not leveling any sort of criticism at the president is the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He was asked about this question on dirt from foreign sources. He responded that Democrats just can't let it go, repeating this line that after the Mueller probe that the case is closed. Do you think we should be surprised that he wasn't willing to engage more on that?
Not at all. I mean, Mitch McConnell has been, in the exact same position, I think, throughout all of this, saying that, the Mueller report, it's case closed now that we know now that it's out, and that we need to move on. And we really didn't hear a whole lot of criticism from Republicans of the president's conduct. It was interesting yesterday after his comments about accepting, foreign campaign dirt, that many of them said, okay, we part ways with him on that. We would call the FBI, but they didn't criticize the president for having said it. None of them really voiced any concern about whether that might have opened the door or been a dangerous thing in terms of inviting that kind of foreign interference in the coming or the current election cycle. So Republicans are willing to go up to a line in terms of breaking with the president, but they don't want to be critical of him, and certainly Mitch McConnell is not going to be in that situation.
Right. All right. Well, this was all sparked because of this interview that the president gave to ABC News. And in a new clip that was rolled out today, we also heard President Trump talking about his former White House counsel, Don McGahn, and he responded to the lines in the Mueller report that McGahn stopped Trump multiple times from firing Robert Mueller. Take a listen.
I was never going to fire Mueller. I never suggested firing Mueller.
That's not what he says.
Excuse, I don't care what he says. It doesn't matter. That was to show everyone what a good counsel he was.
But why would Don
But
McGahn
we had a
lie?
business.
Why would he lie under oath? Why would he lie
Because he
under oath
wanted to
Robert
make
Mueller?
himself look like a good lawyer, or he believed it because I would constantly tell anybody that would listen, including you, including the media, that Robert Mueller was conflicted.
Joe, what do you think of that? Was McGahn lying to make himself look good?
That doesn't make sense at all. No. And this is so interesting because normally when you have a client who's under investigation, or in this case possible impeachment, you want to move things past. You want to do what the Republicans in the Senate are doing and saying, case closed, let's move it behind us. The president seems to just relish in bringing this up. And not only that, Don McGahn holds a really vital position in terms of what he knows. So for the president of all people to be calling him out and effectively calling him a liar, terrible strategy. I mean, any defense counsel would go crazy if their client was doing this sort of thing.
So, Phil, if he thinks that Don McGahn lied, why doesn't he let him testify? Why are they putting pressure on him to not respond to these subpoenas to testify in front of Congress?
Well, I can't figure this out because if I'm sitting there, Don McGahn, you keep hearing this phrase, executive privilege. I want to prevent people from testifying. I'm a private citizen now. I left government years ago. Don McGahn is a private citizen. If the CIA told me I couldn't testify, if the White House tells Don McGahn he can't testify, if I were him, I'd say, you just impugned my integrity. That's really important for my legal practice. I have to sit face to face with a client and say, I will represent you honorably. The president is almost putting the ball in the tee for McGahn to say, I have no option but to defend my honor. I think McGahn's going to appear publicly at some point, and it won't go well for the president.
We have yet to hear from McGahn. Phil Mudd, Julie Hirschfeld-Davis, Joe Moreno, thanks very much. All right, well, still ahead, a federal agency says that Kellyanne Conway broke the law and should be fired. Why President Trump says he's not going to do that. And U.S. Central. All right, now it looks like White House counselor Kellyanne Conway's job is safe for now. This after a federal watchdog agency said that President Trump should fire her for violating the Hatch Act. Trump says no dice. Plus, Melania Trump in the spotlight in a new CNN special. Melania, Woman of Mystery. President Donald Trump is standing by one of his most stalwart aides, Kellyanne Conway, a day after the White House was told by a government watchdog, no less, that she should be fired for repeatedly breaking a law which prohibits members of the administration from making certain political statements. The president said Conway isn't going anywhere.
You ask him a question, or you ask a person a question, and every time you're supposed to say, I can't answer. I mean, she's got to have the right of responding to questions. It really sounds to me like a free speech thing. It doesn't sound fair.
So you're not going to fire her, Mr. President? You're not going to fire her?
No, I'm not going to fire her. I think she's a terrific person.
Here with me again is Joe Moreno, a former Department of Justice prosecutor. The Office of the Special Counsel, Joe, which we should be clear is not Mueller's office. This is different. This is a watchdog group. They are saying that she made political statements. We know that she repeatedly bashed Democratic presidential candidates, violating the Hatch Act. How serious is that?
Well, it's serious if we as American public want to take it seriously, right? I mean, and we have a president who obviously won't. So the Hatch Act has been around for decades, and the point is you should not be able to use your platform as a federal employee, much less a high-ranking federal employee sitting in the White House, to either support candidates that you like or to attack candidates that you don't. And that's exactly what's happened here. And it doesn't sound like it's an isolated incident or a close call. These are numerous and gross violations.
Numerous, but the president says it's because she was asked repeatedly these questions, and therefore she was just answering the questions, and then this becomes a free speech issue. Does that argument hold any water?
It's not entrapment, and it's not a free speech issue. You can be a Hatch Act restricted federal employee and certainly have your First Amendment rights. You just have to do it in the venue and at the time when it's appropriate. You don't do it while on government time. You don't do it while on government property. You have a personal capacity, and you can make a distinction. If you're asked a question, look, I can talk about policy as a White House official. You want to hear my political views? We can talk separately about that as a private individual. You can't blend the two.
And she's obviously not part of the campaign right now. The president is saying very clearly at the end of that clip that he's not going to fire Kellyanne Conway. She's a terrific person. But he also said he's going to look into it, which is a bit of a contradiction. I want to read you part of the letter from the Office of the Special Counsel. They wrote, if Ms. Conway were any other federal employee, her multiple violations of the law would almost certainly result in her removal from her federal position. Never has the office had to issue multiple reports to the president concerning Hatch violations by the same individual. So what happens next? Does the president have any say in this? And what happens if he declines, if he essentially rejects their suggestion?
Nothing. He has all the say. And it's so unfortunate because this is exactly the kind of swampy behavior this president was supposed to get rid of, right? It's treating the powerful different than the ordinary. It's egregious, and it's a shame because, Alex, I think that beyond the short term of what happens to Kellyanne Conway and President Trump in the next few years, it's in the longer term. We need to do a better job with our laws and our rules as far as how we police our government. Because when you have a president who is willing to ignore decades worth of statute and ethics allegations and his own administration saying this person should be removed, and he so flippantly says, I don't care, I won't remove her, well then obviously the rules are not tough enough.
The president always famously standing by his closest aides. But let's say he wanted her to fall back in line. And we're entering the 2020 race. It's going to get very heated. She is going to get asked again about Democratic presidential candidates. When she is, does she just have to say, nope, sorry, I'm a White House official, not allowed to answer that?
There's a right and a wrong way to do this. She obviously knows how to do it wrong. Let's hope she can figure out how to do it right and hopefully then exercise that for whatever remaining time she has in the White House, which appears to be quite a lot of time, according to the president.
All right, Joe Moreno, thanks for breaking that down.
Thanks, Alex.
All right, President Trump rejects polls that show him trailing badly against Democrats in key battleground states. And he spent part of his Fox interview today insulting the man leading that pack, Joe Biden, calling him 1% Joe and much worse. Does Trump fear a matchup against the former vice president? We will ask the chair of the Democratic National Committee. That's next.
We offer a free book on mesothelioma. Call for the free book and receive so much more. Call 1-800-831-3700.
We heard a lot from President Trump today on a whole range of issues. One of his favorite topics, of course, is the field of Democratic presidential candidates. Zero in, as he so often does, on former Vice President Joe Biden, saying he was saved from the scrap heap by President Obama. He also again used a racially insensitive nickname for Elizabeth Warren and slammed both Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg. Watching all this closely is Tom Perez, the chairman of the Democratic National Committee. I spoke with him a short time ago and asked how he and the candidates should respond to the president's repeated attacks.
We respond by winning elections. All the candidates that you just mentioned that he attacked, what they all have in common is they're ahead of Trump in the polls. He understands that he's in big trouble. I had the privilege of working with the vice president, and I've had the privilege of getting to know virtually all the candidates, and they're spectacular. And the reason he is doing this nonsense is that he understands that we've got a deep bench here, and he's scared. And when you're a bully and you're scared, you do more stupid things. And he can do that. When he goes low, we go vote. When he goes lower, we get more people out to vote. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And we've got a great stable of candidates. Really looking forward to the upcoming debates, both this month and then next month with CNN. And what the American people are going to see is that we're focused on the issues, and in particular, we're focused on the issues that improve people's lives, making sure they can keep their health care, making sure we bring down the cost of prescription drugs. And he's focused on trying to find a nickname for everyone.
We did see the president saying again that he thought it was okay to get opposition research, as he called it, from foreign nationals. The White House also tried to flip that discussion to one about Hillary Clinton and the Steele dossier. Do you think that the 23 Democratic candidates who are now running need to sign a pledge that they will refuse any offers of foreign assistance of any kind?
Of course they're going to refuse any offers of foreign assistance because it is criminal behavior. This notion that it's just opposition reason. Oh, I'm sure that if they haven't already said that they're not going to take any help, I'm sure they will say it. Every candidate I've spoken to, that's a no-brainer. This is not simple gathering of opposition research. This is committing a crime. This is going after the heart of our democracy. And shame on all those Republicans like Mitch McConnell who have a sock in their mouth. Their appalling silence on this issue is another absolute indicator that they are just off the rails and have lost their understanding of what democracy is and what you must do to have a fair election. That's mind-numbing, and that's why we're going to make sure we are cyber secure and to work with our partners as best we can. But we should have a partner in the federal government. And you remember the former Secretary Nielsen, who was told, you can't bring up this issue of cybersecurity and hacking in a meeting with the president. It's forbidden. When we are at war, as we are now in this cyber war, the commander-in-chief should be taking charge. But this commander-in-chief is compromised, and that is absolutely antithetical to our democracy. And that's why I sent a letter to the RNC chair saying you should take a pledge with me. And I was the first Democrat to do this. You should take a pledge that we will never use materials that are gained from foreign adversaries, and she wouldn't do that. And in fact, Giuliani said, sure, I'd do it. Boy, where is their moral compass? This is unbelievable. And that's why this election is the most important election of our lifetime. And that is why with our debate schedule and the format, we want to make sure that we create a fair process and make sure that everybody gets a fair shake and that we get our standard bearer and then we are marching in unity toward victory so that we can stem this tide of nativism and divisiveness from this president.
Right. All right. Tom Perez, chairman of the DNC. We have to leave it there. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, well, as the battle between President Trump and congressional Democrats intensifies, some Democrats say it's time to take a tougher approach against the White House stonewalling, and the calls to begin an impeachment inquiry are growing louder and louder by the day. Details now from senior congressional correspondent Manu Raju.
Subpoenas defied, record requests ignored, witness interviews rejected. Democrats say stonewalling from the White House has reached a new level.
That's unheard of. That's unprecedented.
But they are divided over how to respond. And some are growing frustrated that their leaders have not been tough enough with their new House majority.
Well, I think we need to be a bit more aggressive. Timidity will not be a policy that works with Donald Trump. One alternative that stands out there is an impeachment inquiry, and I would hope more members would get behind that.
Behind the scenes, Democratic leaders are seeking to tamp down calls for impeachment. Just this week, holding a private meeting with the House General Counsel to lay out their litigation strategy, and passing a resolution expediting lawsuits to enforce their subpoenas. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi insists her strategy is working.
What we're doing is winning in court.
The Democrats indeed have won 2 early court cases to obtain Trump financial information after their subpoenas were not complied with. House Intelligence Chairman Adam Schiff agrees with Pelosi, but he is now calling for an even tougher approach to levy heavy fines on those who defy their subpoenas.
I think a daily accumulating fine will get people's attention. If they lose, they're going to owe the Congress of the United States a lot of money. That may convince them to cooperate.
There have been more than 200 Democratic requests for information, with at least 28 subpoenas, including for Trump's tax returns, for records about his immigration policies, and about why the citizenship question was added to the 2020 census. Democrats have taken some steps to retaliate, such as moving to hold 2 cabinet officials in contempt over the census probe.
They give you information that has been redacted. Then they send you blank pages.
White House officials say they have taken steps to provide the House with information, like the 17,000 pages provided so far on the census, but have resisted when those demands seek private and privileged communication, as was the case when they instructed former White House counsel Don McGahn to not cooperate with the House Judiciary probe into potential obstruction of justice. House Republicans say the White House approach is justified.
I think the president has reacted as any reasonable person would, given the unprecedented harassment that he's had to endure.
Plus, there have been some breakthroughs, including when the Justice Department agreed to provide more information about the Mueller probe to 2 different House committees.
The Department of Justice blinked at the 11th hour, and the